So let me now cover the key segments of the bill. I will say that one of the reasons I'm speaking first, and then Steve's going to take on another part of this, is not only because I'm Steve's wife, but because I'm a lawyer and I've worked in the IT industry. So we did spend time looking through a 31-page bill that's actually pretty complex. One section of the bill is an energy bill. A second section of the bill is a regulatory section that talks about permits and zoning and things like that, the power to do that for data centers. And the last section of the bill is a taxation or tax bill. And so there are three very different areas in one package. The first one about energy. Builders need a lot of electricity to run. They need energy and water to cool them. And so typically it's kind of hard to find that much electricity nearby, you can't just plug in. So a microgrid is the name for the energy facility that would be built, that would be dedicated to, in large part dedicated to the data center. So certified microgrids would receive exemption from Public Service Commission process. They would receive exemptions from the typical rate setting process. And so they would get streamlined to be able to be built when they're co-located with the data centers and serving the data center. So that's an interesting thing to do to incent data centers to come in, to make it easier to access energy that would be there reliably at a predictable price for them. That's the first part. The second part has to do with permitting, licensing, zoning, and then things like that. And in that section, what the bill does is something I think, in my experience, is very unusual. It establishes a single point of contact in Charleston, in the state, a data economy liaison to be the single point of interaction to coordinate and facilitate all permitting, licensing for a data center facility. And at the same time it does that, to streamline everything, the bill very explicitly prohibits county and municipality power to do anything, to apply zoning, to regulate, to ask for setbacks, to look at water use, to do any exercise of local power as it relates to the data center facility as a whole, or any portion of it. So basically everything comes through Charleston, and the localities can watch the data center be built and operated with no power to do anything about it, including with respect to helping to identify an appropriate site or make decisions that a certain area is not appropriate. Which means that in a county such as Jefferson, which is one of the few in the state that has a zoning framework, zoning laws, those zoning laws would not really apply. That's how I read the legislation. That's pretty broad set of prohibitions in the section of the bill that deals with that. Finally, this tax section here, it's a very technical section, and we've read it again and asked a few people, and here's what we think it does. HB 24 pulls into Charleston into a set of state funds that are designated, taxes that are incremental, property taxes paid by the data center facility that are incremental or additional to the rate that's already being paid, or the amount that's being paid. So if you have a piece of pasture, a piece of farmland in agriculture, you have a certain property tax burden or bill that you have to pay. Once a data center is built, then it's filled with computers and the assessment goes up, and whatever increment, that goes directly to the state. The state has, in this piece of legislation, designated 5 funds. And I think all of them are new, but at least several of them are new funds to which this money would be allocated. 55% of this incremental property tax revenue would go to a personal income tax reduction fund, which would be a fund that would help the state with the governor's leadership. As he's indicated, it's a priority to reduce the personal income tax that we pay as individuals, to reduce it to 0, to make the state competitive, to attract presumably data centers. I've asked myself, well, if you already have a data center that's paying tax, why do you need to reduce the income tax? But that's my own, I don't understand that logic, but that is one of the funds, and 55% of the revenue that otherwise would have gone to the county or the municipality would go to the state. Another 10% would go to a low-income heating assistance program. Another 10% would go to a grid stabilization fund, and so on and so forth. There are about 5 different funds. But the details of these funds, not so important, but the concept here is that the tax increment, the revenue increment that counties like Loudoun or other counties that have enjoyed and used to improve their schools and their infrastructures would not go to the county. It would go to the state for use as designated, as I just described, presumably at the governor's discretion. That's a very quick summary of the bill. The bill has passed the House. It is pending in the Senate. We understand that there is discussion in the Senate in various places tomorrow. The legislative session ends at the end of this week, so there's limited time, and it's uncertain what happens to this piece of legislation, but we thought we'd flag it for the observer community, those who read our materials, because it seems pretty important. It's the top priority of the governor, and it definitely would have an impact on Jefferson County, which is our region that we cover. Steve, do you want to add a little bit, particularly about the impact point and about
the data center
location that you've identified?
You need to mute your phone.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so this really first came to my attention because I was sitting in a Jefferson County Commission meeting on last Thursday, and it came up, and it was apparently apparent that none of the county commissioners had heard about this before. And as they were hearing about it from the tax implications, it was alarming. And I spoke with the Berkeley County commissioners, and they were equally alarmed. And one of the reasons is that both Berkeley and Jefferson are growth counties, and they have been actively looking for ways to grow their commercial tax base to help fund the services that the population growth is putting on the counties in terms of ambulance services, fire services, parks and recs, other services. And what this bill does is takes a very viable and very valuable industry completely off the table in terms of generating local revenue. So what Harriet was describing, if you have let's say it's a 200-acre parcel that's that's agriculture, that's paying about $3,000 a year in property taxes. If you were to put a $1 billion worth of industrial facility like a data center on that, it would pay $3 million a year in property taxes and equipment taxes. The way this law is set up, the county would keep collecting the $3,000 in property taxes, but the rest of it, the $3 million, would go to the state. So, in the sense that there's only a limited number of places to put commercial and industrial activity, or where you would like to put commercial and industrial activity in the county, if you fill those up with facilities where you can't get the property taxes, it's like having a government, facility where they're not paying anything, then you're choking off the potential revenue streams for the county to fund its growth. And so it has to go back and it's really just coming from residential growth, which is, and since the taxes are capped, it just means we're going to be just straining our services, and it's not going to work very well. In terms of what Harry was saying about the bill itself, there was actually a fourth component that was in the bill in the beginning, and it was about requiring the power companies, AEP and First Energy, to purchase coal, regardless of their need to burn the coal, but just to purchase the coal, so they would be running able to run the facilities at 67% capacity, even if they were running at 45. And so this was about providing a market for West Virginia coal, and that part of the bill got stripped out. So when I first looked at the bill, I was like, wow, this is a very complicated bill. It should go through energy, it should go through taxation, finance. It should go through, a government organization because it deals with how local governments are working. But no, it sailed right through the House with very little debate. And it went into the Senate Economic Development Committee. And I think that's where it was, some of the senators started to read the bill and say, wait a minute, this is a lot more complicated than just an economic development bill. Because when you look at a lot of bills, they'll reference one section of the code and they'll amend one section, they'll add a line. This adds, it's like a dozen different sections in very different components of the West Virginia code. And when you read the bill, it's like trying to read, spaghetti. It's all over the place. It refers back and forth. So not the type of thing that if you're a delegate and there's 1,000 bills that you're sitting on your desk and you got to sit there and read them, you're not going to spend 6 hours to try and figure this out. The governor said, I want you to pass this bill. And so they passed the bill. And the Senate, being a smaller group, has had the opportunity, and probably because people have been talking about it, county commissioners have been bringing it to their attention. Wait a minute, this does some pretty, on the face of it, this seems like a good thing, but as you dig into it, the effects on the localities could be pretty devastating. And, it takes out a lot of the safeguards that we built up here in Jefferson County. And, people will, can be frustrating at times, but it also, there's a process, and it's a defined process. And ironically, we've already seen a data center come here to Jefferson and Berkeley County without the benefit of this bill, and they're perfectly happy moving forward. And now with this bill that's before the Senate, that the government wants to pass, what Berkeley County is most concerned about is they had this, their local development authority brought this in. So it's like they have this big fish, and the governor's coming in and saying, that's a nice looking fish.
So let me step in and clarify, because not everyone in the audience may know what you're referring to.
Well, I was going to say that when I.
But you were already starting to describe the effects. So let's start with, when folks ask, how about Jefferson County as a location for a data center? And
folks have been talking about data centers are coming for a while now, and great. But apparently there is a very large site. We're calling it the Carneysville site, but it straddles Berkeley and Jefferson County. And Steve, why don't you now talk about what you found?
Now I can talk. All right. You're going to stay muted, right?
Yep.
Okay. Promise? Okay. So one of the things that's in the bill, it said it's limited to 2 sites. So as I was thinking, it's like, well, why would you limit it to 2? And I thought, well, maybe it's because there already are 2. And this bill was crafted to try and, capture those and figure out how it goes before they expand it. And late last week, the news surfaced about a potential data center in Tucker County that would be diesel powered. So it would fit the criteria of this. It would generate its power on site and use it for data centers. And then I was thinking, well, we've been hearing about, data centers here in the Eastern Panhandle. Where else could you put one? And there's only a few commercial sites, industrial sites in Jefferson County. So I went and looked at those, and lo and behold, there's a 300 acre site, 290 acres on the Berkeley County, Jefferson County border out Charlestown Road behind the Fruit Orchard Research Center, Hospice of the Panhandle. If you come at it from the Berkeley County side, it's Baker Heights behind where the asphalt plant is. And Berkeley County approved it a couple of weeks ago for a data center facility. The Berkeley County parcel is about 90 acres. They're going to put 2 data center facilities there, each of them about 500,000 square feet with all the appropriate infrastructure. So Berkeley County is looking at potentially that's a $2 billion investment there that could generate $6 million a year in taxes. And what this bill could do is just, well, that's all going to go to the state. So that money that Berkeley County was looking at, it's like it's an industrial area. It's where you want to put these things, but they're not going to get the tax revenue. So they're very alarmed about that. And that's, what it's in the Jefferson County side, the bill is written, as we've read it, that it removes local zoning. So now it opens up the entire county. and whether it's gas powered, there's only a few sites in Jefferson County that have gas, but there's some, in the Ranson area, the central area, and as well as out to the west through Carneysville. Or you could do solar. So you could take a 600, 700 acres of solar and put a couple of data centers on there. That qualifies as a microgrid under this plan. And now you can put it anywhere. So I'm not saying that people will do that, but it's just, why would you open the door to do that? I mean, and that was really the question. I think Harriet will speak to this is, it seems like taking a steamroller to, something that you could use a scalpel to do. And, there's lots of ways to incent. And these data center companies, they need to come here. I mean, they literally, this is like a Christmas tree, where you've run out of plugs to plug all the lights on. It's the Griswold Christmas tree, and over there in Loudon. And so we're the next stop. It's easier to get the fiber over here. So they're going to come here. So why, what struck me is, why do you have to give away the store, to get them to come here? Get them to come here under our rules that we can benefit the localities. Was, again, this is, sort of our opinion on it, but it just sort of struck me as very, very forward and very aggressive. So I'll turn this back to Harriet, and I'll shut up now. I have to press the button. Over to you, Harriet.
I don't really have anything else to say, except I've been reading the comments in the chat. And so one of you all, and anybody else who's left here in the room, might also, if you want to add anything. Let's see. One question for Mary is there anything that residents who are interested or concerned can do? Jefferson County Foundation is one organization that has provided great links in the past or guidance for citizen action. Is there anything more that can be done? And my answer and suggestion would be that Jefferson County Foundation does have a link to use on this very issue. I haven't used it myself, but I think it directs emails to Senator Barrett and Senator Rucker. And you could find that on jeffersoncountyfoundation.org. Is that where it would be? Click Make a Difference, and then you'll find their tool. The other way is,
where the taxes go?
The other way is, it's the relevant folks at this point, unless somebody else has more insight, are Senator Rucker and Senator Barrett, who represent our region, who are in the Senate. And as we understand it, the senators are meeting tomorrow to discuss this bill. And so making noise right now, I think, is helpful, if only to say, hey, we've heard a few different opinions about what this is. It's a rush. What are the issues? We're here as analysts, not giving you action. This is not we're not advocates per se, but we're just bringing information that we've spent the entire weekend reading through and analyzing. And we have, we did some homework, suggesting to do what you all want to do.
Senator Barrett sits on the Finance Committee. So if you're deciding whether you want to write to one senator, I'd write to Senator Barrett, because that's the next step. This has to go through the Senate Finance Committee. He's the vice chair of that committee.
Right.